Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Munsell, the MFA's Lorraine and Alan Bressler Curator of Contemporary Art. We are super excited today to bring you some key insights on our exhibition, Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation, which is curated by myself and the writer and musician Greg Tate, and organized by my incredible colleagues at the MFA Boston. We are super honored to bring you today a live session with Futura, one of the 12 artists featured in this exhibition, and a pioneer of graffiti art in public space, also a pioneer of the post-graffiti moment that saw his work and the work of others transition from the streets and the subways and onto canvas in the very early 80s. Among Futura's many contributions to so-called graffiti art of this era, he introduced abstraction into what had been a very letter-based and figurative discipline up until that point. Futura has been compared to Kandinsky for his mastery of color, his geometric compositions and line, and he is an absolute icon. Thank you so much for joining us today, Futura.
Hey, hi, Liz.
Following our conversation now at 4 p.m., we're going to hear from Grammy Award-winning musician Lupe Fiasco. He's going to share the impact of Basquiat's legacy on his own practice and of Basquiat on contemporary hip-hop at large. So tune in at 4 p.m. as well. But for now, we have Futura, whose practice really embodies this kind of seamless merger of visual art, design, fashion, music, beginning in the 80s, but up until today. So Futura, I wanted to kick off our conversation by asking you to describe as much as you can, walk down memory lane, this very specific cultural moment in the 1980s New York. It's sort of a micro scene that has this hugely vast impact on the world through the spread of hip hop culture and graffiti, which you were such a vital part of. Can you describe a bit who are the important figures, spaces, and other artists who you're in dialogue with?
Once again, thanks for having me with you, Liz. I guess I can take off my mask. I'm indoors, I'm safe. And everyone out there, I hope you're safe and being safer at home and practicing physical distancing. Wow, back to the 80s, huh? Okay, 40 years ago, 1980. Well, actually, I think I met Jean-Michel in late 79, let's just say 80, it's easy math. And Fab Five Freddy, who was a friend of mine prior to that, I met Fred in 79. Fred's really the catalyst. Fred's the guy, Fab Five Freddy, AKA Fred Brathwaite. He's the individual of the moment who was able to bring this kind of underground culture, which I was part of, subway artists, graffiti writers, other individuals, to this now downtown art scene that was emerging, music, fashion, a lot of things we didn't know anything about. But specifically, Fred was that guy who maybe brought Keith, definitely Jean-Michel came up to a studio. We had a studio called the Soul Artists. We had a crew called the Soul Artists. We used to be 109th Street and Columbus Avenue, and Mark Edmonds, AKA Ali, another great friend and artist, passed away in the 90s. He and I formed the Soul Artists. We were just a kind of fledgling graffiti wannabe crew, tagged up our names, wrote the letters SA. You know, graffiti culture's filled with tons of acronyms of crews and different graffiti clubs, whatever. And so SA was our thing. And we had an active workshop. This was late 79 into 80, where there were modern day graffiti writers like Zephyr and Hayes, AKA SE3 was there with us. Other individuals, Dondi came on board eventually. but pretty much there was modern day real-time graffiti writers, and then there were the people like myself and Mark, a few years older, looking to see what else we could do beyond the illegality of what we were doing. How could we transition, not to galleries, but to, I don't know, something real, something commercial, even like, oh, could we paint signs? Could we do something? So it was at that time when Freddie brought up Jean and Keith, and now let's say it's 1980 and everything was really starting to percolate. And my first memories of Jean were, just unknown guy, maybe just out of school, very creative, but pretty much, like a loner, and out there doing this, let's say Sama, whatever Sama was. And we used to say Samo, Samo, same old, it's just like Groundhog Day, that's pretty much what Samo means. It's like the same old thing. But he was very clever in his graffiti approach in that he wasn't just tagging up a name and an identity, which is what we were doing. We're all about, hey, this is me, I exist, my name is such and such. I want to be respected, I want to be acknowledged. Jean was off onto his poetic, philosophic, real art world stuff and messaging, and you look back at those tags and they were very clever in that the words he was using, society, this, that, whatever, stuff that, to be quite honest with you, 40 years ago, I didn't really understand. I was like, okay, what's he saying? It's above my my pay grade. But man, we had a great time because at that moment, with the help of Freddie, and I'm rambling, Liz, sorry, but with the help of Freddie, everything came together. I mean, look at the movie. Sorry, the movies came a little bit later, but look at Rapture, the video. I mean, that's pretty much it, right? It's like that's the meeting of everything as far as downtown culture, underground chic, and then you've got Fab by Freddie, told me everyone's fly. As per Miss Harry, she got the info from Freddie, and she was told that everybody's fly. DJ spinning, I said my. And then, okay, you look at Jean-Michel on the turntables. He's not a DJ, but he's just there doing it. And then you have who painting? Lee Quinones. I forgot to mention Lee. I only didn't mention Lee yet now because we tried to get Lee to come up and be part of our thing. He was too famous at the time. He'd had a show in Rome. And, I mean, my God, Rome. Can you imagine having an exhibition in Rome? I couldn't. It just sounded really cool and like pasta and stuff. So, it was probably amazing, and we love that we got rejected by Lee, actually. He was like he was too cool to hang with us at the time. Now, of course, that was actually 1980 with Andy, AKA Zephyr, Andy Whitten. And we had a thing called Essie's Project and stuff. And that's when Lee refused to be part of that. But we're all fantastic friends, in history. And thank God Lee's still here, and so is Eric, and so are a lot of us. And, looking at the exhibition, but obviously 40 years ago, who knew? We were all dreaming and really just, I don't even know what the motivation was. I think it was just a good energy. There was a combination of music, art, pretty good combo right there, and just social setting that was very conducive to, spending time with each other, and going and looking at what each other was doing. And Jean didn't have a studio. Jean had no setup yet at all. Jean was kind of working, with found objects on the street and coming up with crazy little pieces and postcards, all these things that Jean was doing, emerging. And this is even leading up until, let's say, all this rambling, and I'm still in 1980. We didn't even get to like New York New Wave in 1981, curated by Diego Cortez at PS1, which was the seminal show of the moment, because now we weren't just in a clubhouse or a alternative space like Fashion Moda in the Bronx. No, this was a legitimate kind of big time art show in which it looked like more than 100 people may have been in that show. And our chapter, the graffiti guys, the MLZs, the Dondis, the Alis, the Zephyr, the Lee Quinoneses, we all got in that show. And there was a moment of us to have a sort of recognitional element amongst the emerging new wave that was arriving with art, and what you could say Keith was doing and Kenny was doing, and and any of these emerging artists of the time. And of course, I always thought Jean was on an island by himself. And this is even before Jean has met Ramelzi. Ramelzi's not even there yet. Ramelzi doesn't even arrive until 81 and the making of Wild Style. And I forget exactly when Bebop was done, but you know, Ram arrives on a dual level too, because Ram comes with the lyrics and the personality, but then all of a sudden he became this amazing creative, visually creative guy too. So and then Ram, you know, it's funny because Hollywood Africans, I just wanted to say it, love that painting. But you see Toxic, you see Ramelzi, and you see Jean, but then Ramelzi had his own. Ramelzi had disciples too. Like Ramelzi had A1, B1, and C1, which was A1, Tony Clark, B1, I don't know if that would have been probably Toxic, and then C1 was Core. So I don't know. Yeah, Core.
Core B and Toxic.
Core B?
Core's B and Toxic was.
Okay, that makes sense. And thank you for the clarification. I mean, not for nothing. It's an alphabet soup. You're all in it together, right? And A1, you're A, of course, there's no dispute. But yeah, just to say that was really cool what Ram did and essentially bringing on other individuals to follow in the legacy of what his manifesto, you know, the iconoclast panzerism was all about, like spelling out in very, very serious detail the armament of the letter and the weaponization of, you know, it's just like, where Jean was on some creative, you know, oh, what, you never heard of Cy Twombly? You don't know who A.R. Pink is? I'm like, no. Ram was on some mathematical equations that you were like, you know, you walked away, you were like, oh man, my man is totally bugging. And Ram was a kind of genius maniac. You know, he's that like, you know, yeah, you're like a Jekyll and Hyde character. And so was Jean a little bit. You know, maybe that's how they found each other, because they were a little bit of the cut from the same cloth, Jean and Ram. And that's why I guess the coming together of Bebop and that album cover is, you know, probably one of the greatest ever. You know, not to put jazz, you know, in any of these great. Yeah, I know there's great music, but that album cover is amazing.
It is amazing, and thanks for referring to so many important.
I named a few people. I name dropped a few people.
You did. You did. A lot of the images that Futura just referred to are included in our exhibition catalog that is going to be available at your local bookstore and on Amazon any moment. You can pre-order it now. And not to make the plug, but I want to make sure that you can see some of this. This is a painting from the Rome exhibition by Lee Quinones that Futura mentioned from 1979, which is the first international exhibition of graffiti art on canvas. And we have a whole section dedicated to Ramelzi and his crew, the Tagmaster Killers. So we're going to be showing on screen throughout the course of this conversation other images of other works that are in our show. And I wanted to ask you specifically about the decision to transition your work personally from the subway and city walls and onto canvas. And I know you worked with on found objects frequently, such as in this work, Robot with Spray Can from 1981. So could you tell us a little bit more about that decision to make the transition and maybe about this work specifically?
Yeah, so that particular piece, that was from a project, it was a charitable thing that we were doing, if I'm not mistaken, for the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation at the time. And that piece is from a public, sort of like a scaffolding. You know, when they're working on a building, they create a sort of a overhead, you know, for the construction people to work and people can walk underneath it. That was something that happened. I believe that was 1981. 81, 82. Okay.
81.
But myself, Zephyr, and Hayes, who I'd mentioned, we were all working on that project together. And They were in the public space. You know, it was up, 15 feet up in the air on a scaffolding kind of thing. Some individuals stole it from the public space and wound up selling it to Martin Wong or trading it with Martin Wong, rest in peace, also rest in peace. That painting was part of Martin Wong's collection at the Museum in the City of New York and had made the rounds as well. But that piece, which now you guys have, I guess, and it may be from the Martin Wong collection, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that was my intro. Now, by that time, I hadn't had really an exhibition. I guess Fun Gallery, maybe, but yeah, that, it was a time for us, like I was saying before, of trying to get away from just doing illegalities and, going to bomb trains and whatever. I mean, really at the time, Lee was the only artist in New York who was technically painting walls, although his handball courts it's a wall surface. But, street art wasn't around yet as far as people painting walls legitimately. So this was a project we saw as, wow, we're doing something for a charity. My mother had diabetes. This is juvenile, but still, it's always nice to do something for the needy. And so we were essentially, allowed to paint graffiti legally and have it presented in a public space legally. Now, so it just seemed like a good project. Yeah, things were rolling, and in the next 3 years, I probably had 25 shows. And now the idea of transitioning to the gallery, well, that's happening. That the Europeans, thank you to the Europeans and all my European collectors and buyers of the era, because America was not feeling us. We were not celebrities here. But having said that, we could now go to Amsterdam or Paris or Germany or Italy, thanks Lee, and people were looking at our work with some credibility. Like, no, this is legit. I mean, meanwhile, looking at real-time photographs of subway trains, i.e. the late 70s and contemporary 80, 81 trains, they're being painted. So there's a kind of a paradox of, well, how can they be doing this, and then how is this art? So that was the problem in the first few years. Is like, am I an artist? If you would ask me, when standing on a stack of Bibles, I would have said, no, I'm not. I don't know about Pank. I don't know about Twombly. Yeah, I painted the brake train. That shit was an accident. Okay, I went out one night and in 4 hours I came up with that. But that wasn't contemplated. It wasn't like I went in there and said, oh yeah, Kandinsky. I had to be schooled on Kandinsky. I didn't know anything about Russian constructivism or Malevich or Klee or any of that era or those creative individuals. I was just looking at everything else and saying, well, what's missing? Oh, some crazy shit like that. And Anti-Ram's thesis and his whole mantra, well, to me, it wasn't all about the letter. I didn't care about the letter, really. The letter was just, letters are cool when you write letters or when you play with words. But graffiti as a thing, it's, everyone's name. Unless your name was, I don't know, the longest name in graffiti history, it's probably 4 or 5 letters. It's not, hey, Ram had one of the longest names in graffiti history. But it was just to say that letters weren't very, significant to me or important to me. And I found abstraction to be not a cop-out, but somewhere that nobody had went before. And then I found it and people were giving me credit. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm the abstract guy. But I didn't know about abstract painting, And so the next few years was a lot of not just trying to be an artist, but learning about what art history actually was, because I could have told you a lot more about movies than art. I didn't know much about art. And I remember meeting Andy in 1983, and the first thing that came out of my mouth was like, oh shit, you did the soup cans. Like, how ghetto-ly ignorant was that of me? And I remember for years I used to go like, oh man, that's how you came, that was your intro to Mr. Warhol? Like, I just didn't have the, I don't know, the sensibility about things. And to my fault, I guess, it's maybe why I didn't hit back then, really, and like, because for me, I felt like by 85, well, that was fun. Just as Jean and Andy are having their exhibition in the MoMA, like, just as everything was moving forward for Jean, the rest of that story, even included in your exhibition, was kind of taking a back seat because everything we did in the 80s was so dynamic and so incredible that it really was only about a 5-year event. You know, people talk about the 80s. To me, it died in 85. I mean, in a sense of interest and people locally having been exposed to it now for, you know, more than 5 years, but just to say that they were over it. And that's why everything kind of got exported and imported now from Europe and Asia and everywhere that was absorbing all of that energy, whether it was the music, the art, the fashion, you know, and now you've got books written about it, you've got movies made about it, you know, there's enough there to throw it out to the planet and have everyone do their own version of it, which is what wound up happening with graffiti culture. You know, it went around the planet, it spread like the virus we see today. Not bad, very, very bad analogy. And just to say that, I'm not laughing. Just to say that, yeah, I mean, the New York thing, the American experience that we know it, in my humble opinion, was very short-lived. Individuals like Pink, like Crash, Days, all of us, Ram, you know, there was a moment when it just wasn't interesting anymore locally. And no one here, no galleries in New York, no galleries even in America. I mean, you would have to be very alternative, spin-off, trying to catch the tail end of something that was already, you know, done. And once again, thankfully, the Europeans saved our culture. And the European, from the art institutional level, galleries' interest was there, yes, thank you. But even more so for the culture at large, some 35 plus years later, look at what all the kids of the planet did with it once they saw spray can art and subway art and Style Wars and Wild Style. You know, once they got exposed to what we were about, well, yeah, everybody wanted to be about that too. And so whatever my thing was in the early days, you know, getting out there and being a bit of a, yes, I was an artist representative of New York, but I was also like a little bit of an ambassador to try to explain to people who we were. None better than Fab. Fab was really the you know, the extraordinaire individual of like, you got the words, you know how to talk to people, you got like business sense and shit. And so for me, I was late in arriving into all of that maturity because quite frankly, like I just I never wanted to take life really seriously. You know, it's like, it's just too tough out there. And not, you know, having said that, I mean, look where we are now. But just to say that when I was a young kid, even 25, 85, I would be 30 and I have a child, you know, so now that's kind of why my life as an individual would change at that time, because I had other pressing matters, you know, like how do you take care of these people and support your family? So as an artist, as any artist who can obviously tell you, you know, a lot is determined by your situation in life. And back then in the 80s, when everyone was young and not acting irresponsibly, but not having responsibility. You don't have a wife, you don't have a kid, you don't have a loved one that you need to take care of. So sure, you can just about do anything, you know, and act irresponsibly. And sadly, some of our friends passed away by acting irresponsibly, you know, and, you know, looking back, it's a little sad. You know, some people are just caught up in circumstances, but, you know, a lot of my friends who have passed over the years, you know, haven't been just what you call natural causes. So it's not amazing, but I stay positive, you know, and yeah, you know, like I remember that when we were at that time, you know, even before what I would say the end of it all, let's say 83, 84, really like the height of it all. When you could see Jean already being a kind of anointed. You know, I forget when Rene Ricard's Radiant Child article came out in the Times. Seems like 82, 83, 83 maybe.
81, I think, in art form.
That early? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah. So, I mean, just to say that, like, he was anointed, you know, he was chosen because at a certain point, the art world realized, like, wow, this guy's incredible, incredibly prolific, you know, just as far as like output. And he's saying all the right things, because I think the art world needed someone, or they need people who understand the history and can talk to it, can talk intelligently to it, like make work and reference stuff. Like I say, had I been clever and new, even if I would have been phony, I wish I would have had phony intentions and been like, oh yeah, Kandinsky, like played it off like I actually knew something about it. Now that would have been phony and dishonest, and I'm not the kind of person. But just to say that if I could do it all over again, I would be a little bit like that. Like I would be a little bit more, at least giving the impression I know what I'm, I know what I'm referencing here. And it's just a way of, it's more calculation. That's all. It's just about how do you calculate what you're doing. And we were so young and we didn't calculate, we weren't calculators.
You were so young, and
today there's calculators. Today people are calculating, that's all.
Right. I mean, you were so young, and you didn't have a lot of the formal schooling as you were speaking to, but at the same time, it's so interesting that as you're saying, this was a very compressed, kind of hyper focused moment, but yet it was over. Like your names were all over the media and in galleries, but it was over in a minute. But really, its impact was so large. It just kind of spread across the world via your tour in 1982, I believe, the New York hip hop tour, but then also you're working with the Clash, helping to spread graffiti art throughout Europe, as you're saying. And I think we have to remember one of the reasons why this movement wasn't further recognized beyond commercial galleries in the specific amount of time in the US was because there was so much criminalization of graffiti art, and so many stereotypes that were lodged at it, so much working against artists of color in general. So our show really argues that this is one of the most important movements in American art history, but it's been really excluded from art historical discourse. So I wanted to ask you specifically about your role in helping spread graffiti culture in Europe via your collaborations with the Clash. And we have an amazing image of a painting that I believe you made on stage with the Clash.
Yes. Well, thanks for your words about how we were disserviced by the art historical movement and, at large. And it's true, we were. But I don't think we are anymore. And obviously your show will be enormous in helping get people past that, because, or get them to that. Because, I think what happened was, the ripple effect of what we did would not be felt for 20 years, because look at where we are today, and let's just say 80 to 2000 to today. So by the time it was over, give it that 15 years to fester and get out there and do whatever it does, and everyone's still around making little impressions here and there, but for the most part it's not anything really. It's just all quite wild. In that 15 years, young people grow up, they develop. By the time 2000 comes around, everyone's ready to sort of do what they have to do. And 20 years later, we see the results of all that. All these individuals who are the contemporary peer group, they're 20 years younger than me, 15 years max younger than me, 50 maybe, late 40s. That's the age of everyone that's really kind of out there doing it. Well, it's too bad it took so long, but you know what? It did happen, and that does speak to the power of who we were back in the day. When the Clash brought me on tour with them in 1981, I was behind them on stage, spray painting various backdrops and other things, depending on the venue. And that was a remarkable time. That was a great moment for me to align myself with a group who, quite frankly, when I had first met them, I didn't really know everything about the Clash. I mean, I had heard some of the obvious songs and names of songs, but I mean, I'm from New York, they're from the UK. I'm not a Brit from the punk movement. So it's a whole cultural thing that I completely got involved in and loved, and learned all about reggae through Don Letts, and just had the most amazing experience for the next few years. And they were an enormous, I owe them so much, because even before I did anything in New York as an artist, I had been on tour with The Clash. And that was enormous in my notoriety, or whatever it meant at that time. And people, 79, me and Fred trying to get into Studio 54, we can't get in. 81, after that tour, oh, yo, Futura, yo. And we didn't even go in. But it was just the thing, the phoniness of it. It was so obvious, the hypocrisy in a sense of like, well, wait, I'm still Lenny that was there. I'm the same. I'm wearing almost the same. I got the same jacket. I got new sneakers. I got the same jacket. And you didn't, so the phoniness was very apparent right then to me. That, wait, what? Because I'm with them, so, and I've always tried to act correctly. I have a kind of moral compass, and certain things bother me. It's just, wait, well, that's just wrong. So I knew that there was a kind of, oh, because people, they're gonna, and that's just not wrong too. So, I mean, that's not right either. So I made it I tried my best to always speak to the other individuals, who I could help bring along. Part of the beauty of my story is, like, I got exposed to a lot because I was just chosen. But then I always had other people, like I spoke of Ram and his disciples, like me, Dondi, and Zephyr for a few years. I mean, we were equally members of a corporation, but we acted way better as a kind of community, our little group. I feel I operate much better in a group environment. I'm super amazing solo dolo, I can handle it, but I'm even better asset to a team, and because then we catch each other's backs, we compensate for weakness, we're able to work efficiently, so I love that time with The Clash, where essentially I was part of that group, and they were great people. And Joe Strummer, rest in another, there's another guy in the graveyard. Joe Strummer, rest in peace, such an amazing person, and treated me with such respect, and really taught me a lot, kind of almost fulfilled a missing father role for me in a way. Joe did. And I loved him, and I was very, very sad when he passed. But then the rap tour is a whole, the Clash tour was just me. The Clash was just, oh, Futura, you're on tour with The Clash. The rap tour, there was probably 25 people on that thing, from Freddie to Bambaataa, DST, Rem LZ, Rocksteady Crew, Double Dutch Girls, Ram, I mentioned Ram, obviously, Donnie White. So many people on that tour, graffiti writers, rappers, DJs, dancers, the whole circus was on tour. And that was so amazing. And we actually did that yet again. As almost the end of it all was in 1984, I believe. We all went to Tokyo for the Wild Style premiere in Japan. And that was even another level of craziness, because, I mean, here we were on tour in Europe, in France predominantly. We went to London for one night, and we're rapping and talking and everything in our language, and these people speak French. Well, at least the Brits spoke English. Okay, they're in on the black. But then we go to Japan, and like, come on, man. I mean, this is 1984. None of those Japanese kids spoke a word of English. I mean, maybe hello. So it's so funny how the graffiti story and the hip hop story and the New York City kind of story was able to get out there for those few years. And we did our best to kind of get it out there and educate and, inform. And then, like I said, as quickly, well, you said it, it was just over in a minute. At a certain point, all of that was just like, okay. And then it was like crickets. And so I guess good for us as pioneers, or whoever we were, and thankful to the world at large and all those young people who, Jean passed in 88. Okay, that's 32 years ago. Most of the young individuals who may be watching now were not born, who love Jean's work, who, are avid, whatever, information seekers about things and fact finders and, oh, I want to know about this and I want to know about that. And it's just amazing that a whole generation is in place after these people have gone, after Keith has gone, after Jean has gone, after, Andy, Mr. Warhol, like all these people have passed, and it's kind of like very sobering, and so then I look to the youth, because I think in every evolution of stuff, we have to look at our young people and hope that they will continue. It's not even following a path. I always say to people, like, don't follow my path. Like I can draw a map, but I don't want to tell you where to, you know what I mean? Like, you have to find your own way. But I feel that there's enough creative examples from this street, and now it isn't a graffiti culture, obviously. It's a street art community. It's an art community. Let's take even the street out of it, because in your venue, we're not in the street. We're in a museum setting, and that's why I think those type of shows are wonderful for our culture and our history, because we do need younger people. Even seeing Henry's show recently at Bronx Museum, obviously Jose's show as well. And I didn't mention Jose because Jose is, a contemporary of now. And unfortunately, we all can't be part of that moment in time back then. But these exhibitions on institutional levels now are very important. Not only what you were saying in terms of people understanding the importance of who we were and what we did, but for young people coming up, moving forward, for the not even 2030, but 2050. Like looking at young people who are 10 and whatever today, 12, who will emerge and at a certain point in their lives will be in a position to, like yourself, Liz, curate an exhibition at a museum. You know what I mean? It's like it's all just kind of gets cycled through the system, and people have to have good examples and positive kind of markers to point them in the right direction, because there has been some revisionist history. I mean, I'm not going to complain about my place in any of that. I could care less. I'm alive. I'm here with us today. I'm very grateful. But there's been a lot of things have been clouded over, and names have been inserted ahead of things just to show important. You know what I mean? There's some of that going on. Now, once again, I'm never going to call people out, because once again, it could just be my opinion. But to a certain degree, I think social media exposed a lot of, back to my feeling of not getting into Studio 54, a kind of phoniness that's there that doesn't really resonate to me tangibly. Because once again, I come from an era, why, we talked about the 80s and all that time, and why? Because we were all there. We were all making it happen collectively. And we had a greater purpose other than self-interest. So that's gone. The world, Jesus, we've been smacked around now over the past decades, certainly, and now no worse than ever, or worse than ever. But just to say that it's going to be difficult, I think, even moving past all this, to find any kind of an old normal. I don't think there'll ever be an old normal, and I don't know what the new one will be, but I can see from my experiences around the planet that the art part of this story will continue. Young people now that are maybe in isolation, I'm sure they're being as productive as they can. I hope they are. I hope that this is an opportunity for people to focus on what they want to do, whether it's creatively, how they want to express themselves, trying to write a treatment for something. I've been wanting to write this story. Now's the best time forever for people to get things done maybe that they didn't have a chance to do before. So I mean, we can live in the past, and I do. I like I say, I loved it, and up until a point, like I said, because the reality is, like I say, it did kind of end, Liz. Like the acceptance part. Like you said, we were all over the place, and then there was a moment when it's like, oh well,
Yeah, art is always kind of seen through the lens of the present, right, and interpreted in the now. And I argue in the show and in the catalog that Andy Warhol was sort of off trend until you guys brought him back. Bringing back in those pop art references and in worshiping him through, like Fab's Campbell Soup Train and that kind of thing. So there's always these waves of trends. And I wanted to ask you specifically about Jean-Michel as this and your relationship to him. He drew your portrait as part of a series of a number of artists whose portraits he drew on plates, on 43 plates. And, that series included like Cézanne and Picasso and Oldenburg, these giants in art history.
Yeah.
And then also you and Lady Pink and Fab Five and others. So he was actively inserting you into art history when he was alive. He was doing some of that revisionist work that you were just speaking to. Can you tell us a little bit? Were you aware of that series? Did you know that he painted your portrait, and why do you think he did?
Yeah, I mean, and Keith, he did Keith too. Keith is really cool. Yeah, now that I didn't see is, because the thing is, like, there was a moment when 83-ish, 83, 84, there was a moment when there's like a lot of activity at Jean's place as far as going by his studio, people hanging out, getting high, him working, him having like tons of work in his studio, 20, 25 more, a couple dozen paintings going at one time, bouncing off of pieces on the floor, pieces over here, pieces rolled up, weed, drugs, everything, everywhere, all the time, kind of an open house. So you could see John. I remember, not the Hollywood Africans, unfortunately. I didn't see him working on that, but it's like, oh man, this famous Cabria, this famous painting that we actually saw at the Louvre in Abu Dhabi. I think it was called Cabria maybe, but I remember him making that at one time, like things I would see Jean working on. I didn't see the plates. I heard about them. I never saw the plates till way later, or only recently heard about them in the last, decade. Maybe heard something back in the day, but no, because once again, Jean has so many things going on. That could have been a series. I mean, if you remember at the time, Julian Schnabel was working with broken plates. He had a whole thing, right, where there were these plates and they were all broken and then put back together. And it was like a collage kind of a thing of broken plates. So, I mean, Picasso drawing on napkins, plates. I would associate a plate with food and a dinner setting, so I don't know what was the inspiration behind him doing that. But yeah, it is pretty cool to be immortalized by Jean-Michel Basquiat. In a reference, like you said, it wasn't just, oh, look at my crew, but yeah, look at these other artists in art history, i.e. Cézanne and Pablo and all these other guys. And so, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, thank you, Jean, because I didn't see myself, like I'm saying too, like at the time, I wasn't seeing myself on any grand artiste level. I was just one of the guys who was pushing through, had a cool name. I was still, it's funny because I had spent 4 years in the Navy. I spent 4 years in the military before I even got into the beginning of our conversation. So, I arrived to this whole story with a kind of, I almost shouldn't be doing this thought about me, because I had felt like, man, I got exposed to a bunch of things in my military period that should have educated me, like this isn't the thing I should be doing with my young life. And it's just so crazy how I did get back into it. And ultimately, so many years later, I can't deny this was going to be my life. I didn't really have much of a choice in it, even though there were times in it when I was completely trying to get away from it, which is funny also. There were periods, like post 85, 87, 89, where I'm like, well, this is not going to happen. I need to default back to what my father told me of getting a job with a civil servant, getting a civil servant gig. And I took fire. I took sanitation, police department. And then I wound up copping out and I worked at the post office. This is 1988. So I took a job with the post office. And then right across the street from PS1, which I had mentioned was 7 years prior in Long Island City. So there was my life, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, wow. unbeknownst to me, I would have an exhibition in the next year. Someone like Agnes B would come into my life as a patron, provide me with an art studio. And now the 90s was set up for me to kind of, hey, you want to get back to trying to be an artist? And that was an enormous help for me personally, as a kind of, as the French would say, le retour, the return. And I was able, through benevolent, whatever, like a benefactor or someone, a patron as kind as Agnes, who saw something in my work and encouraged me and gave me the ability to make work. And I think for younger artists, buying their work, supporting their work, that's a very important thing. I can tell you. And, I remember when Jean was scrambling before, let's say, his big pop, and he said to me, oh man, wow, I just sold a painting for $5,000. I was like, $5,000, man, that's amazing. And he said, yeah, but they said they can sell 100 of them. So those were, those are early numbers. This wasn't even when it really happened, but like, I mean, him just throwing out there. And I remember him kind of thinking like, you know what? It's like, it doesn't matter. He had a very laissez-faire, flippant relationship with money. And he was like, it's just money or something. I forget how, he just was not very attentive to the money part of it. And indirectly, that part like kind of spilled off on me a little bit, in that I don't put so much importance on a dollar amount. I don't feel that's really the value. The value is what I bring personally to the thing. You know what I mean? Now, yes. Oh, here's one of your paintings, Futura. Oh, it's yeah, okay, but so what? Do you know what I mean? Like, what else can I offer humanity besides something that is a material thing that you put a number on? That's seemingly less important. Mm-hmm. And John was always saying, like, I'll probably be one of the greatest artists in history, but that's not important. Wait, what? Like, how are you saying that? Then that wouldn't be amazing. And so looking back, and even when he passed, and I know we're going to talk about this piece I did called The Box of Death, but
yeah, let's talk about that.
I was so sad. I was so sad because, and then of course, we don't know until 20 years later how important someone, in the loss and the work and the power and all that, the legacy. But I knew in life, Jean was already, not just the radiant child, but really one of the most unique creative individuals I've ever met in my life. And at the same time, I sadly said one day, maybe to myself or to a friend, like, I don't think Jean's going to be with us very long, only in the lifestyle. You know what I mean? Only in the way he's living his life. And you know what? I don't want to add more names to that list, but it was back to what I was saying about being irresponsible a bit. And maybe you feel a little guilty when friends pass away that you didn't say something. You know what I mean? There's that moment. But then I always feel like I don't bite my tongue, and I am very honest with my friends, because that's what friendship is about. That you can say to someone like, hey man, are you okay? Because, I'm worried about you, kind of thing. And just moving that idea forward, if people around you are in a position like that, you should say something to them, because I felt for like a year that I could have done, it's just like survivor's guilt from when a friend passes, that you think like, man, could I have been there more for that person? And so there was some of that, that I have felt with Jean, because we weren't like close. I wasn't, I'm not the most socially like, yo, I'm like always with you. But every time I saw Jean, I had a meaningful conversation with him about things and art and history and whatever, like, the role of the Black artist in society, which you had touched on. And, I'm a kind of adopted, don't know my biological family guy. So I don't have any of those things to grab onto, identity, racial identity. It's, whatever. I came from the stars. So I've never been caught up in that. And I don't know what that's like. Am I a minority individual? Yeah, okay, I guess I am. But I never was feeling the pressures that, let's say, maybe a dark-skinned individual would, or an obviously, like, when you just get racially profiled into a category, and maybe that's been something, has been a side benefit for me actually in my life, that I'd never had to really, I sympathize with everybody, but I don't have a clan. So what do? I don't know where I'm from. So I'm from everywhere. I'm from nowhere.
Future, and just looking forward, to give you the opportunity to not have to look back for a second, if we can look forward in this moment. Is there an upcoming, and just to conclude, is there an upcoming project that you're looking forward to, or something that your fans can be looking out for, in addition to our show, moving forward into the future?
Yeah, good thing you said in addition to your show, because I'm really waiting for that also. Your show, bingo, absolutely, because it's the kind of thing where, even though we are looking back a little bit, we're looking forward, because the message is intended to give everyone information moving forward. For me, I got some projects lined up, nothing crazy, but once again, it's just, I don't feel like my future projects are quite interesting at the moment. I'm staying busy. I want to come out and be, I wanted all this to go away and be like it was. It's not going to happen that fast, but I'm ready. We have some exhibitions lined up later in the year. A lot of things are honestly being pushed back, obviously. So I'm just being optimistic. I've got a great relationship with all of my contemporary artists at the moment, and we're got some projects going. We want to make masks, we want to do stuff, because even though we're in a crisis, there's going to be a post-crisis moment, and there's still going to be, social awareness of what's going on and stuff. And so I want to maybe join forces with some of my contemporaries and do something moving forward, some charitable projects with, could be anything, prints, products, but stuff that we can get out there to people who want to support what we're doing, and giving that to something positive and donating to positive causes at the moment. I think that's the obvious play. Any self kind of promotion, there's time for that later. That's all.
Yeah. Your talent is unbound, and your generosity is large. And thank you so much for innovating, which you're natural at, with us on this new platform and this new frontier for museums. And we look forward to seeing you in the flesh. I know it will happen sometime soon.
We will. Thank you, Liz. And I'm looking forward, basically an hour from now, you're going to have Lupe, who's, yes, I love Lupe so much. We were just recently out in LA, Art Freeze, it's like in February-ish. So I saw Lupe recently. Love him. I hope he's safe. Hope you're safe, Lupe. Stay safe, stay safe. And yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. I know these are not the best of times, unfortunately. And so there's a hint of the sentiment and the emotion with me. I am here in New York City. Unfortunately, a lot of people are passing on a daily basis here. So that it's very hard to smile-ish, even. It's hard to smile. But anyway, we're going to get through this, and hopefully, you'll see me in the future. Now, I'm going to have to go outside, Liz. So just so you know, New York City, it's very rough right now. And this is my mask. And I love you. I love everybody out there. Stay safe. Peace.
We love you, Futura. We love you, New York. Thank you so much for joining us. See everyone at 4 p.m. with Lupe Fiasco. Bye. Thanks.